best is possible in Delhi or India, we have got it. So thanks the panelist, Professor Mahendra Dev, and the hall is full. Best is possible in Delhi. Oh, whatever. Uh, anyway, I was saying this hall is full and people are still coming. Several people have joined online. In a statistics, so much interest. I never thought. Uh, 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 but uh, this Dr. Manna's book is very timely. 75 years of NSO. Of course, NSSO is widely recognized globally that India had the best statistical system among developing countries. And of course, world is changing in the wake of technology, many other developments. So NSS also needs improvements. So that is why this panel we have organized. And Dr. Manna's book gives a very succinct overview of the NSO so functioning, its sampling techniques, what are its limitations. Every organization has limitations. And of course, the researchers particularly, and ISD is a research institute, NCR is a research institute, uh, this data is widely used all over the world, whoever does research in India. That is why, and this is a very important occasion also, because this is not only 75 years. Yesterday was National Statistical Day, Statistics Day. Since yesterday was, we wanted to launch this book on that day, but since yesterday was Sunday, that is why we chose this date. So, of course, a very important day for those practicing statistics and other people as well. So I won't take uh, more time. Uh, I have been given, I have myself given 5 minutes, 5 minutes, because we have a very formidable panel. And uh, so I would like to thank you again for being here and look forward to your contributions to the deliberations, which will follow after the book. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sharma. We are also joined by Mr. William Achauer. He's the editorial director of Business Economics Program for Asia Pacific Region, Springer Nature. He's here on screen. So thank you for joining online, William. I now call upon Dr. Anil Kumar Sharma, he's Secretary and Operations Director in CER, to kindly address the gathering.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to join Dr. Alec Sharma in warmly welcoming you all to this special occasion, the release of Dr. G.C. Manna's book, 75 Years of Indian National Sample Survey, Evolution of Sample Design, Key Challenges and Way Forward. Dr. Manna has been a senior advisor at the National Council of Applied Economic Research and works closely with our colleagues, especially Dr. Poonam Munjal, who is here with her team, and is also, of course, a visiting faculty at India Human Development Center. He has actually done an exceptional job in summarizing the key features of the survey methodology that the NSSO has really adopted over the years, the strength and limitations of the data collected through NSS, and also outlines the way forward to address critical data gaps to further strengthen the NSS data. We believe this book will serve as a valuable resource for students, researchers, academics, policymakers, those who really want to know how NSS has actually carried out surveys over a period of time. We also extend jointly, of course, our sincere gratitude to Professor S. Mahendra Dev. He needs no introduction. Dr. Saurabh Garg, he also needs no introduction. Professor T.C.A. Anand, former Secretary, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Dr. Sudipto Mandal, he's also associated with us as a non-resident fellow. Dr. Radhika Kapoor, Senior Employment Specialist for South Asia, International Labour Organization, for accepting our invitation to participate in today's release event and the panel discussion that follows. Their presence adds great value to this evening. As many of you know, the work of the NSSO has received international recognition and has played a significant role in shaping similar statistical institutions globally. And I know this as a personal experience because when I was working closely with the Ministry of Commerce on the international trade negotiations, and when we used to go to these ministerial conferences, and whenever there was a discussion about data, many of the other developing countries didn't really have any data. And we actually were recognized there as pioneers in collecting household data as well as having our own statistical system. Over the years, as I have said, NSSO has made significant progress. Yes, yet many challenges remain, particularly in enhancing the timeliness and accuracy of data collection and processing. It's therefore our privilege to have Professor Mahendra Dev and Dr. Garg with us, both of whom are well positioned to carry this important agenda forward. And I know the other day when we were launching NCAR's States Economic Forum, the finance minister recognized how Dr. Garg is really shaping the ministry and taking this agenda forward. So there's a long way ahead, but many congratulations for starting this job. This book could not be more timely, coming as it does during the 75th anniversary of the NSSO, a fitting moment to reflect on its contributions and future direction. We are equally grateful to our distinguished guests, colleagues, both from NCAR, IHD, and from elsewhere, who have taken their time from their schedules and to be with us this evening. Your presence and insights mean a great deal. Once again, a very warm welcome to you all. We look forward to an engaging and memorable evening together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. I now invite Mr. William Achauer. He's the Editorial Director, Business Economics Program for Asia Pacific Region, Springer Nature, to give his welcome remarks.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Professor Alak Sharma, Director of the Institute for Human Development, Professor Anil Sharma, Operations Director of the National Council of Applied Economic Research, Mrs. Priyanka Tyagi, CEO of the Institute for Human Development, members of the distinguished panel, Professor Mahendra Dev, Professor Sudipto Budl, Dr. Saurabh Garg, Dr. Radhika Kapoor, and Professor T.C.A. Anand. And I'd like to greet all the distinguished guests gathered here today. My name is William. I'm Editorial Director for Business, Economics, Politics, and Law books at Springer Nature. I'm calling in today from Singapore, where I'm based. Let me begin by thanking Professor Alak Sharma, whom I had the privilege to meet many years ago, for not only being at the forefront of organizing this launch, but also throughout the book's publishing journey. Without his and the IHD team's active support at all stages, it would not have been possible to publish the work in the very short duration that we did. Springer has a long association with the IHD from the beginning, since we commenced our editorial operations in India. And I am delighted that together we are publishing works offering pivotal insights into the region's socio-economic landscape. I would like to thank Professor Anil Sharma for his support offered towards the book launch and for the book's dissemination. Both institutions are at the forefront of policy-driven socio-economic research in India, and it is only fitting that they come together for a book that provides a synopsis of India's National Sample Survey. The timing could not have been more perfect to offer this overview to readers. Not only is MOSPI, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, celebrating 75 years of NSS, but June 29th is also India's National Statistics Day in honor of the country's father of statistics, Professor P.C. Mahalanobis, whose birthday falls on this date as well. Over the years, researchers across disciplines have used the NSS data to study various aspects of a country as vast and diverse as India. The survey has undergone various modifications and methodology revisions to accommodate the changing scenario, and it remains a top-to-go resource offering nationwide household and individual level data across geographies, demographies, the rural-urban landscape, and different population groups and classes. The NSS data is vital not only for researchers and policymakers in the country, but also for international organizations such as the ILO and the World Bank, as well as non-governmental organizations to understand areas that require intervention. Professor G.C. Manna, associated with both the institutes, a former Director General of the Government of India's Central Statistics Office, and the current chairman of the editorial advisory board of Sirwakeshun, the Journal of National Sample Survey Office, NSSO of India, is eminently placed to provide this extremely important overview. I am sure that this book that puts together various lessons acquired over the years, comparisons with similar surveys conducted by other countries, compiling best practices, and emphasizing strengths and weaknesses would be an invaluable resource. And I'm truly glad that we have collaborated on this project with Professor Manna. Considering the importance of the book for the Indian region, we are also offering favorable cost options for institutions. If you are interested, you may want to discuss these with our book sales colleague, Kapil Chaturvedi, who is attending today's event. IHD and NCAER have put together a fantastic panel to discuss the salient features of NSS. It is great to see so many Springer authors on this panel. In fact, quite a few are wearing many hats by being authors of journal articles and book chapters, as well as serving as volume editors. Just the discussion offered by them could spark an exciting opportunity for another book, I'm certain. I'm sure you are all looking forward to what they have to say on the topic. So without further ado, I would like to hand the microphone back to the organizing team. I wish the book all the success that it deserves, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, William. And we have to say, Nupur is here from Springer, head of book South Asia. This book was brought in a very fast track mode. So we need to thank you, and William, you too. Thank you so much. And now invite the author of the book, Dr. G.C. Manna, professor at IHD, senior advisor at NCAER, former Director General, Central Statistics Office and National Sample Survey Organization, Government of India, to please present the highlights of the book.
एक second. I'll go to the first area. Respected dignitaries on the dais, distinguished participants, including those who are watching this program online, good evening to all of you. At the outset, let me thank all of you for sparing your time to attend this function. I also take this opportunity to thank each and everyone who have provided lot of support to me in bringing out this book. They include not only my colleagues from IHD and NCAER, but also the entire Springer team who accorded topmost priority to release this book on a time-bound basis. So once again, thanks to all of you. Coming to the book, as you see, it is the 75 years of the Indian National Sample Survey, Evolution of Sample Design, Key Challenges and Way Forward. I think this title broadly conveys what I have tried to cover in this book. About the contents of the book, if we see, it has got 9 chapters, you see. First chapter is basically an introduction. Then chapter 2 highlights the salient features of the National Sample Survey. This chapter is basically written keeping in mind the researchers who may be interested in doing a survey in some geographical area, and if they go through the chapter 2, they look at the salient features of the survey methodology, I think they will have a fairly rough idea, good idea about how to organize a sample survey. Chapter 3 gives a glimpse of sample design adopted in the NSS, starting from first round till today. The book is up to date that way. I have picked up some important rounds and surveys and tried to discuss the sampling methodology on a diverse set of subjects. So this will give a feel to the readers about how the sample design evolved over time, starting from the first round, how they struggled with the frame, and many things are discussed. Coming to chapter 4, since chapter 3 has become a bit lengthy, in chapter 4 I have tried to summarize the major changes in the sample design as per my own experience. You see, I spent about more than 15-20 years in NSSO as a young officer in as deputy director and joint director and so on. So I have summarized that in chapter 4, basically. Chapter 5, you are aware, some of you, many of you are aware that NSS did some important pilot surveys, the rationale for those pilot surveys, what are the important experiences we gathered, and what are the suggestions they have made that time. So those are documented in chapter 5. We also thought that the book will not be complete unless we give some glimpse of survey methodology in statistically advanced countries. What is the global best practice on certain surveys? So that is chapter 6. I will come to that. I will devote 1 or 2 minutes on each chapter. Chapter 7 is basically for those who want to tabulate the unit level data, how to estimate, arrive at the estimates of aggregates and ratios based on the surveys, the concept of multiplier, those I have discussed there. Coming to chapter 8, it is basically what I have done in that book. I have just discussed, taken some few key indicators, characteristics, survey characteristics, and I have tried to look at the level of precision of those estimates at the state level. Are we comfortable with the numbers, or there are problems with certain estimates? Those issues are discussed, and certain observations are there, suggestions for the data producers, how they can refine the survey instruments. And finally, chapter 9, what are the challenges before the NSS, and what should be the way forward? What are the important areas they should pay attention? This is how the book is structured. Okay. Coming to chapter 1, basically it starts with a brief discussion about the statistical system in India. Then I have come to the rationale of creation of the National Sample Survey. As you know, it was started in 1950, and Professor Mahalanobis was instrumental. With the support of Pandit Nehru, the NSS came into existence in 1950. Professor Mahalanobis, you are aware, he chaired the National Income Committee, and they produced national income estimates for 3 years, 48, 49, 49, 50, and 50, 51. There, they struggled a lot to look at the data. Database was even not up to this level where we are today. So they found a lot of data gaps in the unorganized sector particularly. So this is how this NSS came into existence with the support of both the stalwarts. Subsequently, you see, in the initial days, ISI Calcutta, they were handling the survey instruments. And it was creating a lot of problems, delay in release of result, and accordingly NSSO came into existence. So that is discussed how NSSO came into existence, its organizational structure, then activities of the NSSO. That also I have discussed a little bit, starting with the socio-economic surveys, of course, then annual survey of industry, urban frame survey. I have given certain idea. UFS frame, as you know, it is used as a sampling frame for selection of urban blocks. So that is also there. And NSS also does sample checks on area enumeration and crop estimation. That is also briefly discussed in this chapter. Okay. Coming to chapter 2, it is salient features of the NSS. I have given the how the NSS samples are drawn. I'm not going into details because you have a constraint of time. We have discussed about the geographical coverage, how NSS defines rural area, urban area, and all those things. State participation is a unique feature of the NSS survey. As you know, various state governments, almost all, barring Lakshadweep and Dadra and Nagar Haveli, all other are participating on a at least equal matching sample basis. In fact, states started participating in the NSS program, if my memory goes, it is in NSS 8th round, mid-50s. State governments were requested to join the NSS when NSS was doing the survey on landholding in that round. So since then they are participating. Then unique feature of the NSS is that, as you know, at the top we have a technical body. Earlier governing council was there. Now it is National Statistical Commission. I'm glad that National Statistical Commission, some members are also here. So that is the beauty of the NSS. Coming to randomness of the sample, NSS sample is totally random. By random, in layman's term, if I have to say, I will say that every village or every urban block in the country has some chance of inclusion in the sample in any round. It depends on probability. Similarly, that way, every household or in the establishment survey, every establishment has chance of inclusion. So that's why it is totally random. And since it is random, you cannot rule out the possibility of some far-flung areas selected in the sample, like villages. Let me give one instance of first round itself, NSS first round. In the NSS first round, there are some villages in Odisha, Kalahandi area, which were a totally disturbed area, and investigators had to go through the forests under the protection of forest guards. They had to walk 20 miles to reach that village. This is the experience documented in the first round report, if you see. Similarly, in UP, Uttar Pradesh, one village got selected in northern UP, where the investigator had to wait for the snow to melt so that he can pass over the high passes of the Himalayas. So that's why this is random sample totally. This is one example I gave. This chapter also discusses the various subjects covered in NSS round, starting from first round till today. I'm not going into the subjects of inquiry, you know. But one thing, just it comes to my mind, very unique thing I should say. I was young officer, I told you, deputy director at NSS. Those days, I worked with many people who were very close to M.N. Murthy, who wrote the book, Sample Survey. And many of them are no more, unfortunately. I was told one day that one request went from the center to the NSSO to conduct a survey to estimate number of peacocks in the country. So I just remember, and see, they politely conveyed the message, no, it is not possible, and all those things. Finally, center, they got convinced. So this is just as a passing remark, I thought I will say. Coming to the achievements of the NSS, one major achievement, if I have to say, is that its unit level data is available to the public, free of cost. And also documentation, all reports are in the public domain. That is the beauty of the NSS. Ministry of Statistics and PI deserve credit for that. All documentations are there. And if somebody has to summarize the activities of the NSS, what type of surveys they have done, what type of database NSS has maintained, it is a gold mine of information, you see. And then I think there cannot be no better words than, I recollect Deming 1973, it is documented, I have taken it from Rao, T.J. Rao article, Origin and Activities of the NSSO. Deming said that no country, developed, underdeveloped, or even overdeveloped, they have such a wealth of information about its people as India has through the NSS. So in short, this is the message for the NSS. Okay. Coming to the glimpses of sample design, because it is evolution of sample design, 75 years I have split into 4 phases. First phase is up to 72. Why I picked up 72? That is the year when Governing Council came into existence fully. NSSO Governing Council. So that is the first phase I have discussed here. These cover up to 26th round. Then second phase is 72 to 99 2000. Again 99 2000 being the 55th round survey period. 55th round was devoted to employment, unemployment, and consumer expenditure. And you know, many of you may be recollecting, 55th round consumer expenditure survey created hue and cry in the public domain because it had 2 reference periods of 7 days and 30 days for collection of data on food, etc. And then even many people wrote that one set of response must have spoiled the data for other set. This controversy was there. So that is up to 55th round. Third phase is up to 2016-17. And finally, fourth phase from 17-18, simply because in 17-18, high frequency survey got introduced, PLFS. So this is the 4 phases. And I have picked up some important rounds and surveys. Number of rounds is about, I have noted here, 6 plus 9, 15, then 7, 22, 28 rounds we have discussed. Out of, say, about 84 rounds. So 1 in 3 round and taking different subjects, how the NSS design changed over time, that is documented here. This is a lengthy chapter. That's why chapter 4 I have written, basically summarizing the major changes in the sample design. I'm not going into details. We can discuss in free time. This is chapter 4. Chapter 5 is on pilot surveys. Many of you are aware about 2 pilot surveys. Third pilot survey I have written from my memory, and I was associated with NSSO SD at those days. First pilot survey was on income, consumption, and savings. That is September 83 to December 84. And second pilot study was on to test the reference period for measuring household consumption. That was in January to June 2000. The experience, let me tell you in 1 second. First pilot study, income, you see earlier many rounds collected data on income on experimental basis, even up to 24th round. After that, it got stopped because experience was not good. This pilot surveys revealed that in rural area, the income estimate was 30% lower than estimate of consumption, that is consumption plus savings. This was the message. But urban area, they matched fairly fine. So this is there. Second study, it demonstrated that for the 7-day reference period for some of the food items is absolutely fine. So that's why NSS has changed the schedule and reference period accordingly. Third one is basically to study to test the alternative method of calculation of GVA. I'm not going into details. I think free time we can discuss sometime. You see, NSSO traditionally what they do, they collect information on receipts and expenditure from the same set of establishments. But that time, Governing Council, I remember the name of the member. I am not naming him. I can name him. He is no more, Professor Vidwans. He suggested that, no. Why should we collect data on income and expenditure from same establishment? Let us get it from 2 independent sets of establishments. Governing Council took a wise decision that since we are deviating from the established procedure, let us have a pilot. The pilot result gave a very disgusting picture. Actually, NAD was critical about the estimate of GVA per worker. Our Dr. Kulshrestha is there. We are always getting the criticism in NSS like that. So this method was tried. And this method did not give encouraging result. Estimate of GVA per worker became negative in certain cases. The idea was dropped. Okay. Coming to chapter 6, it is on global survey practices. Here I have picked up 2 topics. Household expenditure survey and labor force survey, and some few countries, statistically advanced countries I have taken, Australia, Canada, South Africa, of course, moderately sound, then the UK and the United States, apart from India, of course. And we have discussed these 2 surveys, how other countries are doing and how India is doing. If you have to tell me what is the major conclusion, I think I can say at this point of time so that I do not forget. On consumer expenditure, let me tell you, most of the countries for low value expenditure items and frequently purchased items, they go for diary based method of data collection. They don't go for personal interview. But in India, For every item, we have the personal interview. All these countries, for frequently purchased items, they follow diary-based method of data collection. That is about consumer expenditure. On labor force, two distinct things emerge. All these countries, apart from producing rates and ratios like labor force participation rate, worker population ratio, they also give the estimate of aggregate. What is the total number of employed? What is the total number of unemployed? They do such things. All these countries. In India, we are not doing it. We are producing only rates, and users are trying to use some figure and multiply it, and they are getting different kinds of results. This is one thing. Second is, all these countries, they are also following rotational panel design, like PLFS is doing in urban area. Now it is also replicated in rural area. When they produce the current period estimates of LFPR, WPR, or whatever, they use composite estimator. They take help of the previously surveyed panels and they pull the estimates with some kind of book discusses in detail. I'm not going into this, but India is not doing that. And I think improvement is possible. Okay, so that gives us the way forward, what we can do here. Coming to, sorry, I think, chapter 7 is basically, I am not touching upon it. It is for those who want to tabulate the unit level data. How to derive the aggregate, how to derive the ratio, what is the concept of multiplier, and I have given some elaborations with some examples. It is for them, basically. Coming to chapter 8, I have picked up some important characteristics or parameters, you can say, of interest, and I have discussed the level of precision of those estimates at the state level and country as a whole. From consumer expenditure survey, I have taken the variable of average household MPCE. Let me tell you, average MPCE estimate state-wise, rural, urban is excellent as per NSS. Margin of error is very small. They are totally reliable. Coming to LFPR, labor force participation rate, worker population ratio, perfectly fine. But there are problems with the worker population ratio for females in certain states. Margin of error is very high. I have indicated those in the report, and I have given some suggestions how it can be overcome. Unemployment rate, unfortunately, most of the states, unemployment rate figures are having high margins of error. Its meaning is that whatever number we are producing, that this is the unemployment rate, true value in the population can deviate by a huge margin. Sometimes it may be 20% apart, upper or lower, even 30% lower and upper. So this is the implication. And certain suggestions are given how to overcome this problem in the book. I'm not describing all those things. Proportion of ailing persons, proportion of hospitalized persons, these are all 75th round. These estimates at state level are fairly reliable. Net attendance ratio, higher level, like secondary level, higher secondary level, or graduate and above, those levels, whatever numbers are produced, they are having high margins of error. How to control it? I think planners, data producers have to debate on it seriously. This is the lesson we are getting from the survey. Number of agricultural households, numbers are fairly robust. Monthly income, average monthly income of farmer households, they have high margins of error for certain states. We need to improve upon it. And based on the ASUS enterprise survey, we find that ASUS survey, number of establishments, number of workers, GVA, gross value added per establishment, there are problems. Unfortunately, let me tell you, as compared to 67th round and 73rd round, the things have deteriorated. Earlier rounds, 67th, 73rd, same coverage. State-wise estimates were fairly robust. RAC, relative standard error, much below 10%. Here, majority of the states, they exceed 10%. What went wrong? I think there is necessity to study it. GVA per worker, it is fine. Coming to final chapter, chapter 9, I have picked up some important topics. I think this is the most important chapter, I think, even for data producers particularly. Sample size, since the estimates I told you, state level estimates, there are high margins of error. I think there is a need to increase the sample size, particularly for smaller states and union territories. That is first lesson we are getting. Second is the issue of underestimation of population. Many of you have seen some article, I'm not naming anybody, criticizing the NSS survey estimates, etc., taking the root of this, that underestimation of urban area. I have noted here in the book that PLFS 2023-24, total urban population of all India is 28% lower, 28% lower as compared to the projected population. And the total population urban India, PLFS 23-24 is even lower than 2011 urban census population. So this is the kind of divergence. I think something are discussed in the book about the whether their frame is inadequate or not. I'm not going into details. That is one thing. Survey on household consumer expenditure, I have already discussed that. I think diary method of data collection for low value items, we need to experiment with that. Periodic labor force survey, quite a few issues. Unemployment rate estimates, how to improve upon it. What should be the stratification method? Something I have discussed. I think time may not permit. I will skip it. I have given some suggestions. Female workforce participation rate, there are allegations, concerns from certain corners that it is underestimated in NSS. What I have done, I have taken 68th round 2011-12, and nearby we had the census 2011, then we had the IHDS, India Human Development Survey 2011-12, and Labor Bureau 2 surveys, second round and third round, conducted around 11-12. I have taken average of those 2 rounds, and I have compared the estimates with the NSS 68th round. It gives an indication there are 8 states where all the other 3 sources, they are giving a higher figure than NSS figure. So there is possibly some hint that there is an issue which needs to be investigated. And certain suggestions are given in the book how to overcome this problem. Then, of course, emerging data requirements, PLFS, certain items of information could be added to estimate the size of the gig economy. It is very easy to add some few questions. How to value women's domestic work and caregiving services in monetary terms. And what could be its value if we have to look at in relation to GDP. For that, some questions can easily be added. I am not going into details. Idea is that those persons, those ladies particularly, who are doing, say, cleaning of the house, cooking, etc., on a wage salaried basis, their wage data, if we can collect it, that wage data multiplied by the total number of work women and all those things from time use survey, that will give some valuation. You can value the women's work. So basically, adding some questions in the PLFS questionnaire will resolve this problem. Okay. And also, as you know, I'm not going each and every one. Labor under statistics of work, 19th ICLS, they gave a broader view of the collection of data on statistics of work. I think we have to take care of that. Finally, quarterly changes. This is an important area. PLFS, when it was introduced, urban area, all of you know, we are releasing state-wise, even for 22 major states and all India, what is the WPR, what is the LFPR, what is the unemployment rate, every quarter we are releasing. And we have demonstrated in the book, I have an article also in the EPW, it has been demonstrated there that state-wise these estimates, quarterly estimates, they don't differ significantly. I mean, difference is not statistically significant. Its meaning is that if we look at the pair of observations, first quarter and next quarter, apparently you may feel that there is an increase in WPR or reduction in unemployment rate. But in the true population, either things have not changed or it could be opposite. So we are not confident. You cannot say with 95% probability that yes, there is an increase, there is a decline. If you have to detect the change, with probability, high probability of 95%, what should be the sample size? Those are all discussed in this chapter. Okay. I think then use of composite estimators we have discussed, that has merit. And finally, enterprise survey, I have already indicated why ASUS figures are little on the, I mean, we have the problems. We think we need to deliberate on that. Certain suggestions are given. Survey on income, ministry has already taken the decision to carry out the survey on income. We let us hope that it will be done very sincerely and taking the lessons of the previous experiences. Need for methodological studies, I think I must impress here. I think quite often what we do, we simply change the design suddenly. I am not blaming anybody. I mean, there is a working group and they are empowered. I mean, they have. But then I think, for example, let me give you PLFS stratification variable. Households, how are they are selected? They are stratified according to number of educated members. There is a paper article where we have seen that other variables, simply number of adults is a much better variable than number of educated members. EPW article you can see. So we have explored certain ideas. I think this needs little bit of work within the data producing agency. Enterprise survey I have already discussed. Methodological studies, I just gave one example. Even the splitting of the questionnaires, I think there could be some pilot exercises. Finally, I think I will stop here on the issue of contract investigators. Quite often when I attend some workshops, people always say that the quality of data is very poor, contract investigators, without any scientific basis. I have discussed with people who have worked, who are associated with the NSS. Many people say that even many contract investigators are much more serious. But here there is a mixed bag. Some will be serious, some may not be. So if you have to take a decision on a scientific basis, some idea is given here. I think we have to do some pilot survey, maybe in 4 or 5 states, where you use 50-50 ratio, 50% contract investigator in one set of villages blocks, another 50% in another set. Look at the estimates, whether you find that there is a bias, and if I mean, you get my point. If you find that regular investigators data is much closer to the otherwise available figures, then we have a sort of scientific evidence that quality of data of contract investigators is poor. I think some studies are required. So finally, I'll stop here. And I think, as I have told you, this book is written for a wider audience, different types of readers. I hope it will be useful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manna. And now is the time for the launch of the book. I request all the dignitaries on the dais to kindly together launch this book, which is right there, wrapped in front of your, right in front here on your table. Yes, and this, we should give them a big round of applause. This is Dr. G.C. Manna.
Just for a minute.
Yes, I invite Nupur Singh on the stage from Springer, who has been very instrumental in bringing this book out in fast track mode.
Nupur, come. Nupur. Said come because of you.
Yes, Nupur.
Yeah.
Anil sir has it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Priyanka, तुम भी ले लो.
Just here you go. The last one. I'll join. The applause should continue. This is a very important contribution by Dr. G.C. Manna. 75 years of Indian National Sample Survey, evolution of sample design, key challenges and way forward, brought out by Springer Nature. The alternate, as Nupur tells me, if you would like to announce this.
All right, we have made arrangements because, as William mentioned, it's so important for readers of this country to have access to it. So we have made what we call a low-cost edition possible, and we have, a couple from our sales team. If you want to, make inquiries about it, you can do that. Actually, to protect the book's interest on the global stage, we cannot do it for on an individual basis, but the low-cost edition is available on the institutional level. So if institutions want to buy for their use for students in their institutes, they can do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nupur. And now we move on to the panel discussion on strengthening national sample survey experiences and future perspectives. This panel discussion is being chaired by Professor S. Mahendradev. He's the chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. Perhaps if I'm not wrong, this is your first public event after assuming this position. So we are very, very, very happy and very thrilled that you've assumed this position. Many congratulations, sir. And the panelists, yes, this comment. The panelists in this session are Professor Sudipto Mandal, he's Chairman, Center for Development Studies, Trivandrum. Dr. Saurabh Garg, he's Secretary, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, Government of India. Dr. Radhika Kapoor, Senior Employment Specialist, South Asia International Labour Organization. And Professor T.C. Anand, Visiting Professor at ISD and former Chief Statistician of India. Now the reins of this session are in your hands, sir. This is over to you.
Yeah, good evening to all of you. Um, I have 5 minutes. Alex Sharma has given me 5 minutes for chairperson's remarks. Let me first congratulate Dr. G.C. Manna for this excellent book on 75 years of the Indian National Sample Survey. Also thank IHD and NCAER for inviting me to this book release function. But I disagree with Alex Sharma. There's a lot of interest in statistics, particularly the NSS. I think all over India and the world. So that's why we can see many people online as well as here physically. I've been using NSS data since I think early 1980s from my PhD days, around 45 years or so. In fact, I've collected manually in early 1980s from Shakespeare Sarani Road. That time we didn't have computers. So at NSS region level, employment, unemployment, consumption, expenditure, literally myself and Jimal Unni, we collected there. So I've been using extensively. In fact, Professor Dantwala from Bombay University used to call me NSS man because I've been using NSS only, mostly NSS thing. And this is probably the best data source in the developing countries or elsewhere on this employment, unemployment, consumer expenditure, in spite of all the problems mentioned. Because many stalwarts were involved in this, from Dr. Mahalanobis to Indian Statistical Institute, many statisticians and experts involved. So there are some problems, but I feel that this is the best source we have. And I'm happy to know that NSS completed the 75 years and a book has been written on this. And you can't have a better person than Dr. Manna with his vast experience in Indian statistical system and who has made invaluable contribution to the official statistical framework, particularly the NSS. So as the book title says, it discusses the evolution of this sample design and the key challenges and way forward. I think all the chapters are important, but chapter 9, you also mentioned, is the most important as it is, it discusses the challenges and way forward. Because we're all interested in, I think the panel also will focus on more on strengthening whatever the gaps we have on NSS. So basically, the experience of NSS in 75 years is useful, but how to strengthen this NSS data by addressing critical gaps is important. In the chapter 9 and the presentation, he mentions of course, first one is the underestimation of population. For urban, he said the recent one, 28% diversion in PLFS. But I don't know whether the census 2011 census frame we have been using, whether that has something to do with the recent underestimation kind of thing. Second one, of course, household consumption expenditure, which I've been using quite extensively. Yeah, you mentioned about fifth round. I think the first time Abhijit Sen pointed out the problems in the 99-2000 consumption data problems. Because the same things were in one, the weekly as well as monthly kind of thing. So it might have corrupted the data. So that was thing. And also recent one, 22, 23 and 23, 24, there are comparability problems. I mean, because I was in the working group because we thought that the questionnaire earlier used to take 2.5 hours for a household. So we thought maybe 3 rounds, 3 times you go to with 45 minutes or something, then that will give much more. I think that was the reason, they have split, because 2.5 hours, by the time end of the questionnaire, non-food consumption particularly is underestimated by the time the fatigue comes for a household. So that was the reason why I changed the consumption data. But there are comparable problems. Probably they should have done some comparability things in the sample that would have made life easier. Another issue, of course, consumption is the difference between NAS, National Account Statistics consumption, and the NSS consumption. So it is true that the differences are everywhere, all over the world. But in India, we see the difference increase from 10% in early 70s to almost 50% or 40% now. So why there is so much difference? Then on the sampling, the smaller states, as you mentioned, union territories and all have problems of, this higher RSC, relative standard error. But of course, some people did earlier, Professor Radhakrishna and all, they matched the state sample and the central sample to get, of course, district level estimates. So what is the situation now with the state sample and what is the quality of the state data? Of course, female participation rates are relatively low compared to the world average. As you mentioned, maybe more probing questions can give, like the time use surveys and others. And lastly, of course, the new data requirements he mentions, we have to capture the gig workers and the unpaid domestic and caregiving service of women and migrant workers, capturing more. And also on this enterprise survey, today somebody wrote in Mint, former, I think your colleagues of MOSPI, saying that the unorganized sector of non-agriculture enterprises, there is a overestimation of the thing in, because we are using for urban areas all directory establishments kind of thing. So I don't know whether probably TC Anand can, because he commented on TC Anand's paper. Of course, now there is a lot of interest on income recently after the announcement of survey and how to tackle the problems on income data. We know that there are many problems, but it's important to have the survey. And lastly, of course, the contract workers, he already mentioned, whether it is the quality is low or it's maintained. So these are the things. Thank you very much. So we have a very distinguished panel to discuss many of these issues. So they all worked on this NSS data. So each discussant is given 10 minutes each. So I am strict with the time. So I'll follow the order given in the program. First, I will invite Dr. Sudipta Mandal to speak.
Thank you, Chair. And I also want to thank especially Dr. Manna, Dr. Alak Sharma, and Dr. Anil Sharma for inviting me to be a panelist in this very important discussion of very, very important publication. As has already been mentioned several times, it's the 75th year of NSS and a very timely publication. Nobody could be a better person suited to have brought out this book. I had the advantage of reading an earlier draft of this because Dr. Manna had sent it to me for some comments. And I'm mainly going to refer to some of the points I'd made there, which he has picked up in his revised version of the book. Some he could, some he could not. I'll refer to a few of them in the limited time that is there. But let me begin by saying that this is really not a book about NSS data in the sense of what the NSS data are showing us, whether it's consumption or employment or what have you. But it's a book about what I would call metadata. It is data. It's a book about the data of NSS and how these sampling designs have changed, how they evolved over time, and so on. And this is a very important book, but not bestseller type book. I think it's a very heavy duty going. It was described as being succinct and summary and so on. Is nothing like that. I think it's a very, very detailed and comprehensive account of our data system. And so it's hard going to really absorb all of it. And I'll refer to a couple of those points. Now, there are two types of audiences, I think, for this book. One is statisticians and students of statistics, including, I would say, those who have, like Dr. Manna himself, joined the the statistical service and been part of those who produce the NSS statistics and so on. That's one kind. The other kind of audience are people like myself. We are users of NSS data. And most of what I'm going to say is obviously going to be from that perspective of a user. As I said, I did have a chance to look at this book earlier. And I think the heart of what is there in this book, in fact, the largest chapter in the book is chapter 3. I think some 60, 70 pages of it. And the real story of what has happened with NSS is there. I mean, there are other specialized chapters which are much shorter, of 10 pages. So this one is very long. So one of the things I had hoped that Dr. Manna would do is, first of all, give us some rationale for the periodization that he had. Earlier, there were only 3 phases. Now, in his revision, he has actually given 4 phases, and he just explained, as he spoke today, why this is his periodization. I think that's a very useful thing, especially from readers like me, from our perspective. Also, I would say that I did suggest that there are some surveys, some items which they're repeated surveys, like the old employment unemployment survey, now replaced by PLFS, then the consumer expenditure survey, the enterprise surveys, and so on. And again, to make this very heavy chapter 3 digestible, I had suggested that why don't you pick the main ones and give us a summary of how those, like the employment, unemployment period, how those have evolved over time, over these 70, 75 years and so on. And I'm very pleased to see that that is there. I think it's there in the last chapter, if I'm not mistaken. Consumer expenditure surveys, the employment, unemployment, now PLFS, and also the enterprise survey. Some of it was already referred to. Yeah, I think it's in chapter 9 on the way forward. Now, quite a lot of this book is really about the design of samples. And this is something that is very, very familiar to students of statistics, statisticians, and so on, but not so much to people like myself who are just users of this data. So it's very useful to have, some kind of a, maybe in a box or something, describe what are these different things. I'll just give you, for example, for instance, probability proportional to size with replacement. That means something to statisticians. What does it mean to us? Similarly, circular systematic sampling with probability proportional to size. Then interpenetrating samples. You read all of this in descriptions of NSS data, but what does it mean? Can we unpack this black box for those who are just using this data and are not statisticians? Now that is there, I think is there in chapter 2. Some of it is already there. And also in parts of it in chapter 4. He talked about all this earlier. So I'm very glad it is there. I was hoping that there would be a box with some of these little simple things explained there. But anyway, it's there. Now, I want to move away from what is there in the book to what is not there, but it is very important for us. And I'm especially wanting to refer to this because it's implied in some of what is being discussed in the book, but it's very important. Particularly, I'm glad that Mr. Garg is here and also Mahendra Dev with his new hat, because there are things that need to be done which are of a very important nature for two very important, what I call blind spots in our database using the NSS. And I've referred to discuss this in earlier in my presidential address to the Indian Economic Society earlier this year. But I do want to repeat it here, especially because of the panelists who are present here. One of this overestimates unemployment. The overestimates employment. The other underestimates employment. And as Dr. Manna was mentioning, the amount of error you have in things like in the measurement of unemployment, which also means in the measurement of employment, is very large. And there are reasons for it, which is understandable. And this is what I mean when I say there are these two blind spots. Now, to bear with me a little bit, this is rather arcane details about what these blind spots are, but I'll try and be as brief as I can and try and make sense of this. The first blind spot is about underemployment. In block 6 of the question, this I'm talking about current weekly status, which is the major basis of what we say when what unemployment estimates or employment and so on. Now, in block 6 of the schedule, you get very detailed data, which is amazing. On I've noted it down, rows 3.1 to 3.7, give you for every member of the household how many hours that person worked on a particular day, how many hours that person did not work, and so on. Row 4 also summarizes all this in terms of each of these persons in the week, how many hours that person actually worked, how many hours the person did not work or was available for work or not available, and so on. So all this detailed information is there. Unfortunately, by the time you come to row 5, which classifies all the all these workers, you're either classified as employed, and what qualifies you as being employed is that for more than half the week, say 4 days, you work just 1 hour a day. So you work for 1 hour a day on 4 days of a week, you will get classified as employed. If you haven't done that, you get classified as unemployed. And there's nothing in between. There is no provision for classifying what is underemployment. And obviously, this is a huge problem in a developing country like India. And this is one of the important blind spots I'm saying. So all underemployment people get treated as employed. So that's why you get a very high employment rate and you get so much error in the unemployment estimates and so on. And this can be fixed quite easily by adding in the code. There's 81 and 82 for employed, unemployed. Add another little, addition, code 3 for partially employed. And that would really take care of a lot of problems. It's a very simple entry, but in a big organization, bureaucracy, it's not easy to even do this. And that's why I'm very glad that you're here. If you could think about making this change. Now, this is overestimating employment, as I said. There's another kind of blind spot, which is underestimating employment, and that has to do with circulatory migrant labor. Many of my colleagues here, Dr. Srivastava, Alak Sharma, and so on, here we have been talking about this a lot. All the village surveys show you that this is probably one of the most dynamic and most important phenomena about employment dynamics in the country today. Huge migration of workers, especially obviously mainly male workers, from the relatively backward states, the backward districts, the more advanced areas, whether it be in Tamil Nadu or Andhra or Surat or Gurgaon, wherever. A huge migration of people who normally would go and work in these other places for 7 or 8 months in the year and with overtime employment on top of their wages, which can vary from 500 in one state to 700 in another state, and then they do overtime, so they earn quite a lot per day. They work for 7-8 months, and then they go home. Now, the way the NSS data, the procedure is such that you only get counted as a household if you have a stable address for at least 6 months in the year. And you get counted as a member of that household if you have been there for 6 months in the year. Now, by definition, these circulatory workers get left out because they go from a rural area, go more than 6 months, so they're not counted there at the origin. They're not counted destination because they're, most of them, by the way, construction workers, but also in other industries and services. But they're not typically resident in one place, sometimes just living in their place of work and then moving on itinerant from one place to another. So they're not counted at the other end. So this huge dynamic phenomenon, which all our field surveys, village studies are showing are very, very important, and I have my colleagues here to bear me out on this, are not getting captured in the official statistics. And in my view, this is a major source of now underestimating the level of employment. So I've mentioned to you two sources of blind spots or errors, one overestimating and the other underestimating. We have been discussing this with Dr. Manna a lot, and Balwant, I saw him here earlier, and what to do about it. Since he has not had the opportunity to mention it in his book, in the way forward, part 9, chapter 9, so I'm mentioning it myself here. There are a couple of other points I wanted to raise, especially given the panel that we have. And one is about resources. Okay, I'll finish. I have only 2 points. One is about resources and capacity. 15 years ago, when I happened to be a member of the National Statistical Commission, even then we were talking about the resource constraints of having investigators on the staff and hiring contract workers and so on. And this quality problem, which has been mentioned about a couple of times, has come up. Now, over time, I don't know whether the budget for MOSPI has increased so enormously. I don't know. But meanwhile, the outputs have increased enormously. You have from quinquennial surveys, we then went to annual surveys, now we're going to monthly PLFS statistics, not just for urban areas, but also for rural areas. So it's a huge increase. Now we are thinking also of this income surveys and so on. So the outputs have grown enormously. I don't know whether the resources have grown. So how is this circle, this square and circle thing being matched? It's possible that digitization has made a huge difference, but I don't know. I'd like to hear from people in the panel who are very experienced in these matters on this. The other is that if you are indeed relying in more on contract workers, as has been mentioned, Dr. Manna mentioned that there's no evidence that they are any worse than regular employees. But it would be nice to, as the Chinese say, walk a step at a time, feeling by feeling the stones. So do these pilot surveys, whether it's on circulatory labor or on this quality of construction, contract labor and so on, to see what is happening to the quality of our data. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudipto. Now I request Dr. Saurabh Garg.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here. And a pleasure to know that statistics can attract so many people. So it's really good to see that. First of all, congratulations to Dr. Manna. He's intimately even now associated with a number of our committees and provides guidance on the way that we are, and we hope to continue to get that. It's also the occasion of, we just yesterday celebrated 75 years of NSS on Statistics Day. And it was good to see a commemorative coin we issued, which has its own meaning. And we had a very interesting panel also on how frontier technologies would impact official statistics as we go ahead. And I think that's a recurring theme that we've been working on what can be done. Uh, I've gone through the book. I really won't like to get into the details because I think he has covered the history of NSS, issues in NSS and sampling design. And I think chapter 9, as Dr. Mahendra Dev also mentioned, gives the challenges and way forward. And perhaps each of those challenges that he has mentioned merits a discussion on its own on what the issue is. And it also gives an idea that we've been doing brainstorming on some topics in the past. We did one on how to um, how to handle PDS, free rice in CPI. We did one on that. We did one on, which is mentioned in Dr. Manna's book also, on how to ensure that affluent people participate more in surveys. And we did a brainstorming with RWAs across not only Delhi, but in other parts and getting them on virtually in. And I think the other issues which have been mentioned in this, including whether it's on PLFS or in PLFS, in fact, there are a number of suggestions he has made. I think would be very happy to, in fact, work with NCAR and IHDS on some of these issues and have brainstorming sessions on that. So what I would really take this opportunity is, given the fact that there are so many people interested in NSS who have been users of NSS, both present out here, just to give an idea of what are the changes that we are planning and what's the way forward that we are planning, which might be of interest to many of you. But before I mention that in brief, I must mention that Dr. Manna mentioned about the problems of Kalahandi district in the initial. And I must say that I have spent 3 years in Kalahandi and as a young officer, and it was a challenge working in Kalahandi, but probably the most fruitful time I had and a very what should I say, fulfilling time I had in working out there. So these places always give a different flavor to what do you think about India and wherein we are. There are 3 or 4 broad, what should I say, objectives that we have while we are working in Ministry of Statistics. I see many of my colleagues out here, and they would agree with me, perhaps. That we are focusing on, and which includes the surveys and which includes other central statistics, the GDP and the inflation and IIP numbers that we bring on, which are regular, and of course the host of NSS surveys, including household consumption and PLFS and the different rounds of the NSS. One obviously is to ensure that we are so much more timely in bringing out our reports. So we've brought down the report from the end of the survey that within 45 to 90 days, we must have the report out, because it doesn't make sense to have it out after 8-9 months or a year. And we have been able to do that over the past year. We have no report which is pending for release of any survey which has been done. And I think with the help of all the colleagues in the ministry and in the National Statistics Office, we have been able to do that. The other is regarding the frequency of the surveys. I think some of them was mentioned. We've looked at internationally, and the international examples also given out here. Labor market, which is now we are doing monthly. I'm sure you're aware there are a few countries even doing weekly. I don't think we're going to go there at any stage as yet in any case. And now it's been 2 months that we brought out the monthly, and we hope to bring out the quarterly. We'll be bringing out the first quarterly one will come out, which will have further details. And obviously the annual will have even a greater level of details. That said, I mean, I think the issues which have been mentioned in PLFS, some of them have been taken care of, but would be happy to have a brainstorming on how we can ensure that many of the others are also taken care of. Uh, but I must say that on migration, which Dr. Mundle mentioned, we are planning to introduce some of those questions, and even on based on skill development and education ministry's suggestions, we have introduced a greater tweaking some of the questions to get that level of additional information which can be gleaned from the PLFS survey, which is there. A third level of focus is on increasing granularity. So obviously, at the national level, we need whatever data. Uh, at the state level also, there is some amount of data that is coming out, but how we can bring it out. But I think the need, and which has been expressed by a number of states, is where all can we go to the district level? Because that's where a lot of the policy inputs are required, and policy directions, if we have that level of granularity, it will help uh, uh, ensure that the policy interventions are so much specific. And given the broad overview of Viksit Bharat by 2047, obviously going with the data as existing as usual will not be able to ensure that we can get all the districts, including aspirational districts, etc., at the same level. So where we can go at the district level, I think that's really the focus. And for that, we are working with the state governments. And I think that's another big focus going forwards, to ensure that the state governments pool in the data wherever required, because it's not going to be physically possible for us to increase sample sizes to be able to bring out district level estimates in all. In some we can, and we'll have to pick and choose where we want, but the others will have to be done by the with the states, and that's what we are working with the states. The other major focus is the use of technology. I think we've done away with any paper-based surveys. We don't have a PAPI, it's all CAPI. We have an e-Sigma platform, so it's on the cloud, so that it directly picks up at the time of it's really a nearly real-time data collection, and it goes back, and then data validation is built in the tablet, so that in case there are any data points which seem to be off, it can be done. But apart from data collection and data processing, I think where our focus has been a lot is on data dissemination. I don't know how many of you had the occasion to look at our e-Sankheki portal, which has a large number of data visualizations, and we continue to put on more and more data on it, so that accessing data by any researcher should not be a problem. The unit level portal, we have revamped that one, and it's become so much more user friendly. Yesterday, we released a GOI Stats mobile app, so that you can download the app on your phone. And the obviously on the app, we can't have all the data that we have on the portal. So we will have one which is most downloaded often, and we'll put that. We'll have the most recent 5 or 7 quarters or months or years, that data, so that but I think I think that's the focus a lot more, to be able to harness technology to ensure that data dissemination, data visualization is so much better. And the other area which is beyond NSS is the focusing a lot more on using administrative data. I think it's over the past decade or more that each ministry has a lot of data that they produce, so that where such data exists and it is of a minimum credible level, and we brought out 4 or 5 standards to be used by across all ministries: a national metadata standard, a statistical quality assessment framework, a set of unique identifiers, etc., so that the administrative data, which is of a certain level of quality in terms of credibility, etc., is number one, usable, and we can see where are the data gaps, and so that we don't duplicate it with surveys. As of now, we have not reached that level that the administrative data will have that same level of statistical validity which a survey would have. But wherever we can, we should be able to avoid that duplication. But more importantly, ensure that if that data exists of a certain credibility, it should be available on our website to researchers that this is administrative data available of this which could perhaps be used. So I think that's another focus of the ministry as we go forward. And apart from the income survey where we have a group working on, it's composed of some people, some of them are here also. But a travel and tourism survey we are starting from tomorrow because that's been a data gap. So our focus of these surveys is that in the NSS different rounds, 17th, 80th round or 81st round, we focus on those data gaps which are important for the economy in terms of which are maybe the growth areas. We are looking at common property resources, especially in the urban areas, so that common parks, etc., what is the level of usage. So we focus a lot on ensuring that the data gaps that exist are taken care of. And I think I must say that what has been mentioned by the fellow panelists, and I'm sure would be mentioned, I don't think we will be able to collect such a group of interested statisticians, users together, and would love to collaborate with NCAR, SBS, and many of the other stalwarts who are here and get your guidance so that NSS, which has always been the pioneering survey globally, we continue to maintain that status, and we ensure that the part that NSS can play in a Viksit Bharat 2047, it effectively plays that part. So once again, thank you for inviting me out here. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to interact with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Garg. And now move to Dr. Radhika Kapoor. Yeah, it's good that you concentrate on forward looking.
Thank you so much, Chair. Let me start by thanking both IHD and NCR for inviting me for this book launch. And also thank Dr. Manna for writing this book because it's really a very comprehensive overview of the evolution of statistical production in India. And it tracks the many surveys that have happened over the years, how the sample design has changed, and it explains it in a manner that is accessible to a non-statistician. So I would say that it's a must read for any researcher, any economist who's looking to do work on the Indian economy and use NSS data. So thank you very much for writing that book. And of course, Dr. Manna has always been very gracious with his time to explain all the issues that he's also highlighted in the book. But with researchers, he's been very patient. He takes time to explain all these issues and how we can address them. So, of course, as all the speakers before me have highlighted, I think the chapter which is of immense interest in this is chapter 9, which is the focus of this discussion as well. And of course, Dr. Manna has talked about issues which have persisted for a while, and they also come up in the chapter where the global practices, the best global practices are highlighted. There is the issue of the underestimation of the urban population and then not having the aggregate numbers in the employment reports. There are issues around the 19th ICLS. There is the issue of how the measurement of the gig economy is going to be done, and some of these are challenges which are not unique to India. There are many countries which are grappling with the issues. Be it aligning with the 19th ICLS or getting a size of the estimate of the gig economy. For me, I am going to really talk of it like Dr. Mandal from a data user perspective and how this data can be utilized. And I think this question becomes very important at this juncture because there is a lot of high frequency data which is now being produced by the NSS, in particular the periodic labor force survey, which is now become monthly. The quarterly numbers will also be available for rural areas in addition to the urban numbers that have been coming up to now. Not only is this data a very high frequency, but the unit data is very easily accessible. It comes out in a very short period of time. As Dr. Garg highlighted, the time between the data is collected and processed and released and made available to the public is very short. So there is a lot of scope for using this data for informed policy making in real time. So how can actually now, from a data user's lens, and my comments will come from there, as I mentioned, from that lens, the availability of all of this data opens up some very exciting possibilities of using it for informed policy making. And let me pick up one example, which I find particularly interesting, is that now that we have quarterly estimates both in urban and rural areas, we're going to have monthly numbers. How, for example, can the RBI look at labor market indicators when it's making monetary policy decisions? Now, this is a conversation which perhaps could not have happened a decade ago because we had quinquennial unemployment surveys. And this is also something that I had touched on at the ISLE conference. But in the context of the points that have been raised by Dr. Manna in the book and also some of the articles that he's written before, how do we actually interpret the quarterly changes in the unemployment rate or the worker population ratio or the labor force participation rate? I think those become very important in the use of this data for informed policy making. Now, the book clearly shows that if you look at the changes in the quarterly estimates, the differences are not statistically significant at the state level, and even at the all India level, it can capture a change of just up to 1%. Now, what is the interpretation of that? As Dr. Manna says, it means either that the numbers are not changing so frequently, or even if there is some change that is happening across the quarters, which appears to be small, the existing PLFS methodology is not being able to capture those changes. Now, if it is the case of the latter, that the existing PLFS methodology is not being able to capture those changes, then of course, Dr. Manna has laid out solutions like enhanced sample size, alternative stratification processes, methods of sampling, and so on. But the other thing that we need to think about is that what is this quarterly data actually telling us when we look at metrics like unemployment rate or a labor force participation ratio or a worker population ratio? Because, and this is, going back to something that Dr. Mandal also said, that in a labor surplus developing economy, in a dualistic labor market, whether there is an improvement or a deterioration in the labor market may well not be captured by an unemployment rate alone or by a change in worker population ratio. Some of these aggregate numbers may conceal changes in, say, the composition of employment, the changes in self-employment, regular formal work, casual work, or the earnings of these different kinds of workers. So in such a scenario, if the fact that we don't see this change is in fact because it is not that the quarterly change will be captured simply by looking at an unemployment rate or a worker population ratio, then from the policy side, we need to think about more carefully about what are really the right metrics to capture the slack in the labor market. How can we broaden the numbers that we get from these quarterly, what would be the right labor market indicators in addition to, it's not as if these numbers are not important, but we need to expand the ambit beyond the unemployment rate. So in that sense, in addition to the points that he's made about the sample size not being adequately able to capture the change, we also need to think about what are the other metrics which would be the right set of labor market indicators beyond the unemployment rate, which can supplement the analysis and actually help us to understand whether there's an improvement or a worsening of the labor market situation. So that's one point on the use of this data for policy purpose. The second is that there is a lot of conversation happening world over on what will be the impact of technology on the world of work. What are the jobs that are going to be destroyed? We see some alarming figures on what are the proportions of jobs that are going to be destroyed on account of automation, or what are going to be, the new jobs, the reinstatement effect that will happen. Some of this is a little difficult in the context of developing countries, because a lot of this analysis actually draws from ONET data, the occupational data that is there in the US. So in addition to the various things that Dr. Manna has highlighted, I think a deeper understanding of the task content of occupations in developing countries like India will also be very useful in terms of understanding the implications of technological change. Because with technological change, it's not like the entire job will be destroyed. There will be certain tasks within the occupation that will be automated and others which will be not. So, studying the occupational data and the task content of the occupational data will also become important from a policy perspective when we're trying to understand, what kind of skills will be needed in the future and so on and so forth. So a lot has already been said on the PLFS. So I actually want to also make some remarks on the enterprise survey, which is really quite remarkable. But I think there are many more papers which are written on the PLFS data. I actually started working on issues in employment using the ASI data, and Rana is here and he's talked me through and explained the various challenges that are there. But the ASI data and now the ASUS data, these are very, very rich data sources. I mean, of course, they are important for GDP calculations. And of course, they're important to understand what are the sectors where jobs are being created. But they're also really important to answer another very critical question from a policy perspective, which is that what are the firm types that are creating jobs? And I think, Rana is sitting here and he can perhaps also step in later in the Q&A on this issue. We've had this conversation several times about how do we identify what are the firm types that are creating jobs? And by firm types, the ASI data, for example, has so much rich plant level data on the characteristics of the plant. Now, in the ASI sample is divided into two groups. There is a census scheme of firms and there's a sample scheme of firms. Now, the census scheme comprises of those plants which are tracked every single year. And these are large plants which have 100 or more workers. Then there is the sample scheme, which has the plants which are less than 100 workers. And these are not captured every year in the survey. Now, the ASI survey does actually give us panel ID. So we can do what we call firm life cycle dynamics and understand how the plants have evolved over time. But unfortunately, the plants that we can actually track every single year in the survey are the larger plants, which have 100 or more workers, which are in the census scheme. So I wonder if it would also be possible to cover some smaller plants which are currently in the sample scheme, which have fewer than 100 workers, and track these every year to get a sense of this firm life cycle dynamics, how the firms are growing. And this is also important from the lens of all this conversation that happens on MSMEs. So the question of really, are MSMEs growing? Are they expanding? Now, of course, there's also a challenge around the definition of MSMEs, because we have the MSME definition given as per the MSME Act, which is in terms of turnover and investment in plant and machinery. And that is not always very easy to apply those definitions to the ASI schedule and create a typology of MSMEs, though the ASUS survey does have an explicit question on whether it's micro, small, or medium. But having that typology would help. But my submission on this would be really that the question of firm life cycle dynamics, which has not been explored in the Indian context, is very important, and being able to track these smaller firms which have less than 100 workers is important. And relatedly, the use of this word firm, enterprise, plant, establishment, I mean, I'm using it all very loosely, and I think all of us do that when we are doing this work. But what these surveys are really capturing is, like, if it's ASI, it's capturing a factory or a plant. So it's just that one unit. And the same hold true with the ASUS survey, it's capturing that one unit. But when we talk about the issue of a firm could have multiple units or plants, which all may not be in the same state. Because if two plants are in the same state, then I understand they're covered under one combined ASI schedule. But if they're in separate states, we'll actually not be able to map it and realize how that firm is growing. So in that sense, also somewhere, we have a limited understanding of how firms are expanding. Maybe firms are not growing by simply increasing employment or by expanding capacity in the existing plant or by setting up another plant in the same state. They could be setting it up in different states as well. And as per my understanding, I don't know if there is any way of collating this information at a firm level. It should be possible, perhaps, because there is, from the survey schedule. I understand there are questions on the GSTN number, on corporate identification number, and so on. So that would be, an enormous help. And I think also the other related question is about the ASI, is that in the ASI, and I think Dr. Manna has also mentioned this in the book, is that we end up having plants which have fewer than 10 workers. And this is not a small number. It's about some 22%. So the question of why do we have firms which have an employment which is below the threshold of the Factories Act is unclear. Now, many people have written about the issues around the frame. But it is also possible that perhaps these firms were large. They had more than 10 workers at some point in time, but then the growth of these plants has happened in such a manner that they have gone below 10 workers. So in that case, being able to track these firms which are in the sample scheme would also be useful and help to understand why these firms are still existing in the ASI database. So I think there are so many issues in the book. I think there are issues around female labor force participation, and we could have a separate discussion on that. People have talked about, Dr. Manna has also written about, do we adequately capture female workforce participation? But there is also the question of, if you look at the recent data, we see a very sharp increase in female labor force participation between 2018-19 and 23-24. We see a complete reversal of the decline that was witnessed since 2004 to 2018-19. I think what actually drove that phenomenal increase is also a little unclear. Yes, no, I'm about to stop. So there are really very many issues, but I would just to summarize to say that if we are going to have this quarterly and monthly data, it's important for people who are using that data to reflect and analyze how best that can be used. And if there are other metrics that are required, be it a labor underutilization metric, or being able to track the share of regular formal workers or self-employed, is important. And thirdly, the enterprise surveys, definitely underutilized, not given as much attention at the PLFS, but a very rich source of data, especially to understand where the jobs are going to come from. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kapoor. Now I request TC Anand.
Thank you, Dr. Mahendra Dev. And let me start by thanking IHD, Dr. Alak Sharma, and NCAR, the co-organizers, for having called me here for this release. I'm particularly happy to be here because of my long association with Dr. Manna when I was the chief statistician. And the fact that he's written this book really is very nice. And I think it'll be very valuable, not just to all the people in the room who have clearly showed their interest in the book by coming, but to a very large audience. And I would echo something which Pringa made, that they're offering institutional packages and so on. And the secretary is here, maybe I'll make a suggestion. You might want to consider ways of making sure that at least every ISS employee gets to read this book, because there is a lot of information which is there in the book, which is based on Dr. Manna's own association with the NSS. And one of the things which has happened, it's a consequence of governance in general. We have this fear that we will lose institutional memory. And I'm really glad that Dr. Manna has written this book, because it's a way of capturing institutional memory, because he has so much of it. All the time I was secretary, I would often turn to Dr. Manna, and I have another institutional memory over there in Dr. Kulshrestha to help answer so many of these questions which I used to have about things. I think it's important to find ways to both record this memory and capture it. Nupur there's an implicit suggestion here that you can reach out to Dr. Kulshrestha for another book on SNA and India. There is a lot of perspectives which he will bring to that topic. So I'm very glad that this book here, and I must compliment everybody associated with the book for bringing it out. I have the advantage of being the last speaker, so I will be able to draw upon everybody's talks to make a few points, not too many of them, I hope. And I am fortunately in the lovely position of not formally being the secretary, so I'm not required to answer any of the points, but I will have suggestions of my own to make. First of all, there's something very interesting in the history which Dr. Manna presents, and I think it's important to understand that history because Mr. Garg, or Dr. Garg, when he was talking, referred to that challenge. NSS changed because there was a need for change as it happens. The first phase of NSS, which he talks about, which I also agree with as the first phase, is essentially a research phase. It was a period in which NSS was primarily a research organization. Individual surveys were valuable in themselves because they were all taking up an important research question. There was not that much concern about meeting the requirements of any policy agenda at all. And this is partly because NSS was seen as the research agenda of ISI and Professor Mahalanobis in general and Professor Mahalanobis in particular. In 1972, the NSS gets reorganized in part because there was a huge demand coming out of primarily the Planning Commission, but also bodies like the Finance Commission for a strengthened database to feed policy making. And NSS was converted from a purely research body to a body which feeds certain types of policy inputs, primarily two. Planning Commission and Finance Commission are the two big inputs which I am highlighting because both of them had in various reports identified major data gaps, and both these bodies, NAD at one level and NSS, came together in many ways to strengthen many of the surveys which were introduced then and standardized then were a response to that need. This process continued more or less uninterrupted for the next 30 odd years. But the liberalization process set up in 91 changed the demands of policy. There was a need for a pressing need for more frequent interventions. The old Planning Commission approach that you fill the tank once in the beginning of 5 years and then forget it for the next 5 years was no longer considered appropriate. And the statistics organization was being pressed to give more, if you like, timely data. The first major reform in this actually happens a decade later, which Dr. Manna does not bring in which NSS plays a crucial role, but it's a joint venture between the NSS and CSO, which is the production of the new CPI. And the Radhika talked about user thing. It was a remarkable success that in less than 5 years, it had entered policy debate to a level which I have in an article said may have been too fast and they maybe need to think through it again. But it became the central indicator on which monetary policy was being discussed. The next evolution in that was the introduction of the PLFS. It was also in large measure a recognition that we need to have more frequent labor market indicators, which leads to my first quibble with Dr. Manna's book. In the topic on pilot surveys, he actually leaves out a very major pilot was conducted to which he was also associated in many significant ways. The PLFS was piloted. PLFS has a methodological report produced by the National Statistical Commission on the survey design, followed by a pilot, which was discussed extensively in a consultative meeting in which many of the people in this audience were also present, held with the jointly in the partnership with the Labour Ministry. ILO was a partner in that discussion, after which PLFS was actually launched. So I know this because I was not there at the initial recommendation of the NSC, but I was there in the subsequent implementation of it. So that was a major pilot which was done. A second major pilot, which Dr. Manna had led on, was a major methodological innovation, which not only played a role in India, but globally, which was the time use survey. This was a pilot done in the late 90s and formed the basis, though many changes were made from the original pilot, of the time use survey, which was launched in 1917-19, and the linkages between the two can be seen. So that is a small quibble on Dr. Manna's book about things which have been left out, and partly to demonstrate my own knowledge about the NSS. So now let me turn to Dr. Manna's chapter 9, where many people have said very important things. And I think there is the chapter is intended as food for thought. There are many suggestions which he's made, and I'm glad the Secretary, Dr. Garg, has emphasized that many of these will be taken up in internal discussions and in methodological discussions. Maybe in the manner Dr. Manna suggests, maybe in a different manner, but the point is that these matters should come up into discussion. I would like to add to this a couple of things. One is, in this transition from NSS being a purely research outfit to a policy outfit to one which is now catering to the need of high frequency data, for that matter, monthly data, quarterly data, in addition to annual data, which is all of which are actually not there in the original, in the NSS of the 72 to 2000 frame. This annual data is a new development in a strict sense of the word. All of these are also raising, the NSS is being asked to do a lot of things, but we need space for research. Unfortunately, there's so much volume of regular production that to expect NSS to do the research alone is not going to be possible. And that is where innovative institutional arrangements need to come out. Radhika, you talked about users need to, I think that is now extremely important. One of the things which happens, for example, in the US, a very large body of empirical work and alternative ways of looking at the data come not from their principal data producers, but from the Federal Reserve. Most of us, for example, will use the Federal Reserve database to access American statistics rather than the principal data producers, BLS or the national accounts analog, simply because they're one of the largest users. I think this is something which I mean, this is not really for Mosby here, but this audience, and through this audience, I would like to communicate that there is a need for the larger policy community to also now engage in this in terms of data use. I defend the NSS on one ground. One of the things which everybody says NSS is not used to produce this report, it is no longer producing this. What they don't appreciate is what was done in terms of a major reform. Dr. Garg pointed out that reports are now released within a short time frame of the completion of the survey work. 3 to 6 months. I mean, it's really remarkable. And the unit level data follows almost immediately afterwards. The expectation is that the user community will rise and meet the demands of the relatively less endowed users, which is the lay public and others, and fill this gap. This includes bodies like NCAER, it includes research institutes and others. They would all have to figure out ways in which they can make the data more accessible for the larger users, and they should all play a role in this. But NSS will still have a role, and there is a need to have innovative methodological studies, whether it is done in-house by the NSS or in partnership with universities, other bodies, research institutes, because some questions will not be satisfactorily resolved until we can have careful studies done. Dr. Manna has hinted at a few. I will make one suggestion of my own. The concept of the household or family, I think Shudipto mentioned it in the context of he was talking about. The NSS household is defined in a certain way. We have tinkered with it. The education survey allowed for people who were living in hostels to be accommodated in the NSS survey. Health survey also did something because there is a cost of maternity, this thing burned by daughters who are not normally treated as part of the household. But I think we need a more systematic methodological exploration into the household concept, which has not been done. And that would be something which we need to do. The larger issue is space needs to be created in the framework to accommodate such methodological studies and pilots, which are outside the demand for time. So resources are major issue, and Sudipta talked about it. And I think we'll have to find ways, the government will have to think about ways in which these types of methodological innovations can be supported. I think some things will need to be approached with a degree of care. The demand, for example, for granularity, which Dr. Garg mentioned, is being persistently there. But granularity has to be approached with care, because when we partner with states, a lot of initiative will have to be taken that we follow comparable approaches, not just in design, but also in the manner in which the survey is conducted. Dr. Manna brings this out, that NSS take careful detail to ensure that the sample was distributed evenly across the year in terms of its distribution over space, to make sure that all the relevant elements were being met. Many times, state governments will comply with the NSS frame, but design, but only in a certain parts, not all of them. The NSC recommendations partly address it by examining where poolability can be done, but ensuring that states and central samples are conformable is a major challenge. I have a couple of small points, and one is
2 minutes.
I'm very glad that Dr. Garg has raised the issue of administrative data. I have myself, in numerous newspaper columns, argue for greater use of administrative data, because I think India is underutilizing the wealth of its administrative data. We need one more thing. We need a marriage between better marriage between administrative data and NSS work. I'll give you an illustration. One of the frames which NSS uses for ASI is administrative, which is the frame maintained by the Chief Inspector of Factories. It has been pointed out by many users that that frame has completeness problems. So Dr. Manna brings out the fact that NSS in 2016 tried to accommodate by including elements in the frame from various other administrative sources, which includes corporations, Shops and Establishments Act, and so on and so forth. But whether that was being done in a systematic manner is something which we don't really know, because that has not been well documented. We need careful documentation of this, and we need a better examination of whether alternative frames are possible. Now, this requires first a methodological study, and then a careful choice to be made on this. But the possibility of other frames has increased, because both at the household level and at the establishment level, a variety of frames have become possible because of government action and schemes. So looking at administrative data as a source of numbers is one thing. Looking at it as a way to improve NSS is another possibility.
Yeah.
The final thing, and I'll close with that, since you were the one who raised the thing, you referred to an article which was responding to my column. I think you should read the article. There's a slide. The purpose of that article is to make an observation that maybe in the 2011 revision, there are issues in comparability with the manner in which informal sector is measured in the earlier revision. Now, that's an issue which I'm not getting into. The issue which I was raising, and which is whether in the process of updating between 2011 and now, there are systematic structural changes which have taken place, which leads us to underestimate informal sector. And I say that that case for that is not made. I mean, the under or overestimation, I'm saying the case for that is not made, because there are enough indicators suggesting that while there are certain trends in gross value added per worker, there are countervailing trends which are happening in employment, and Sudipta actually enriches that by talking about the implicit trends in other elements of employment. Taking all of that together, I don't think the case is as yet made that there is likely to be a structural. We can, of course, this will be settled when the base revision estimates are released because they will have done the calculations again. We'll get a sense of that perspective. So my point is that these arguments don't necessarily challenge the way work is done. However, there is an issue here. And as we move to more frequent data, I think there is a risk, and this is a risk which I hint at in many of my columns. The policy establishment needs a lot of care before they adopt a new data series as a principal indicator to base policy on, whether it is monthly series on employment or it is the ASUSC proposed monthly indicators which are going to come out of that. Because we would need a sufficiently long time series of behavior and validate it against other measures before we start using it in policy. I think there is a case to begin the research on comparing those to other indicators, but I would urge a measure of caution before they are incorporated into policy directly too soon. I mean, that's really something which.
Thank you.
What comes out in this is that the statistics ministry has evolved a lot. And I'm going to end here by making a plea to the audience here. I think it's also important to recognize the changes it has made. There is very often users tend to have give me more in the Oliver Twist thing without sort of acknowledging that they are actually being given a lot more compared to what they were given in the past. The impression which is conveyed by neglect is that our statistics is worse than it was. And a very influential paper written sometime last year talks about a golden age in the 50s and to the decline in the Indian statistical system. If anything, it is the reverse. And I would urge all of you that in making criticisms, which is an important part, don't carry it so far as to create a problem for the organization which is actually making all these changes. It is the need that the work of this ministry also be acknowledged. Since I'm no longer secretary, I can make this plea on behalf of all of you that this is something which everybody needs to do, because there's a tendency to sort of say, oh, things are so bad. Actually, the fact is you are able to have debates today in a timeliness which was not possible. Manna talked about, and I'll close with that, the Abhijit Sen thing about the 99-2000 survey. Do you know which year it took place? It took place in the mid-2000s, 2006, almost 6 years after the survey was complete. Today, comparable debates on comparability are happening within a year. That is what has happened in the last 20 years. It's something which often gets forgotten. So I'll stop with that. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Manna.
Sorry, we have another function. That's why we have to close by, I think it's supposed to be 8, but I have only 1 or 2 minutes. And apologies to Dr. Manna, we don't have question and answer session and also his reply. As Dr. Garg mentioned, I think this user interaction will be very useful. I hope they'll have many more of this and extremely useful discussion on this, how to strengthen further the NSS. And it has done a remarkable job over 75 years. And then as Dr. Garg mentioned, it's now timely kind of release. Every month they're going to have PLFS, and we are going to have a brand new CPI, IIP, GDP in 1 or 2 years. So hopefully we'll have more better times than some of the earlier where there was gap in the NSS. So with this, I thank all the panelists. Very interesting comments and useful suggestions. And also thank Dr. Manna, of course, and the 2 organizers and the Springer So with this, I think I thank all of you for attending this function. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Mahendra Dev. Time now for a group photograph, and I'll quickly name a few people who deserve a special vote of thanks. So it's my honor and privilege to extend a heartfelt vote of thanks on behalf of the organizers to all who contributed to making this event a great success. I can see a full house here. So many people joined in, so it is all due to you, sir. Heartiest congratulations to Dr. G.C. Manna. Manna, the author of the book launched today. The book is a significant contribution and will be of immense value to a wide range of readers, including students, researchers, planners, policymakers, and survey organizations across the world. And so for me personally, thank you again for giving me the opportunity to work in the production of this book. So thank you so much. Extend our sincere thanks to Professor S. Mahendra Dev, our very own Professor S. Mahendra Dev, who is also the founder member of ISD board member, and all the distinguished panelists, Professor Sudipto Mandal, again an ISD board member, Dr. Saurav Garg, Dr. Radhika Kapoor, Professor TCA Anand, for their valuable insights and thought-provoking contributions to the discussion. Thank you very much. We would like to acknowledge our co-organizing partner NCAER for their support in organizing both the book launch and the panel discussions. Special thanks to Mr. Anil Kumar Sharma for his cooperation and encouragement throughout. And then we are very grateful to Springer for publishing this book on a fast track mode. Our special thanks to Apni Nupur, who's sitting right here, head of books, South Asia, for a personal commitment and effort in bringing this book on time and so that we could launch it today. Our appreciation to Mr. William Achauer as well, and much appreciated, Nupur. And the success of this event is also to the dedicated team at ISD, which is all sitting here and working behind the scenes. I would definitely, even if it sounds indulging, I'd like to take their names. Ms. Jyoti Girish, our admin and executive officer, Rekha Aswal, admin and program coordinator, Akash, who's standing here, Varsha, our young interns, Parul, Renu, Ananya, Farheen, who are all doing the social media dissemination, our accounts officer, Usman, who's sitting outside, Arzu for the branding, Nisar and Wahid for electronic dissemination, and our multitasking staff, Agu and Amarjeet and Devraj, who have filled in these, got all the printouts done. And a special mention to Vikas Dubey standing there. What could we do without you, Vikas? He's our young researcher who organizes all this. And thanks to Manish for his technical help, AV documentation partner Deepak Ji and Hemant sitting at the back. And moreover, our faculty at ISD has always pitched in for all the events and helped us to make these events a success. A big thank you to the entire faculty sitting here. I can see our board members, Professor Ravi Srivastav, Professor Harsham. Thank you all for joining in here. And special thanks to the IC team. And finally, I would like to thank Professor Alakhin Sharma, the director of ISD, who leads us from the front, who does not let us walk, who makes us run and rather sprint all the time. He plays a pivotal role as the architect of this event, and like in the past, he has continued to guide and coordinate in our efforts, resulting in yet another successful event. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you all for attending and participating, and thanks a lot for all your patience. See you at the ISD events. Thank you very much. And there's time for a group photograph, please. Nupur. ISD team. Vikas.